Whew. Video games. Indiana Jones. What happens when you put them together and then take away the video games part again? You get Uncharted 2022, starring Tom Holland as Nathan Drake and Mark Wahlberg as Victor Sullivan. See the resemblance? I don't! Okay, so the studio took some creative liberties when adapting Uncharted's story. Like, instead of Drake meeting Sully in the streets, he meets them bartending. And like, the original game is really good, so they decided to make the movie really bad. Did I say that part out loud? Uncharted Drake's Fortune, released on November 19th, 2007 in North America, exclusively for the PS3. But I played it, along with its sequels, on the Nathan Drake collection for the PS4. In Uncharted, he plays Nathan Drake, a snarky but lovable treasure hunter, and I really like Drake's character. He's serious when he needs to be, but is on the whole a pretty goofy and super endearing character. But under the goofiness hides like a surprising degree of intelligence. Drake sports an extensive historical knowledge on ancient civilizations and architecture, and can even speak a couple languages. But then on the flip side, he says stuff like, oh crap and oh geez, in like the middle of harrowing, life-threatening scenarios. Speaking of life-threatening scenarios, we got the pirate gang, who's after the same thing Nate is, El Dorado. No, not the City of Gold. It's actually just a big statue. Also, I said gang, but small army is probably a better way to put it because I killed literal thousands of these guys over the course of my 8-hour playthrough. We'll get to the gameplay later, okay? Also with Drake is Elena Fisher, a camerawoman for a TV show that Drake somehow convinced to fund him essentially grave robbing. Drake tries to cut her off once things start heating up with the pirates, but she sneaks onto his plane anyway, which, lucky for her, crashes and explodes immediately. Oh yeah, also, how can I forget? We have Sully, Drake's mentor/father figure. Sully's a super important part of the story that really helps to highlight Nate's character. Oh, what's that? He's dead? Never mind, he's dead. They killed Sully. So yeah, El Dorado, the plot device driving everything. A MacGuffin, if you will. It's on this mysterious island with all these ruins, and Drake's gotta find it before the pirates do. That's it. That is the entire plot of the game. Find El Dorado, fight the pirates so they can get it. Start to finish, the goal does not change. There are some little twists, there are many story elements. The plot stays the same. This is one of my biggest problems with Uncharted, is just how simple the story is. There's like 3 villain characters, but they're all pretty forgettable. There is a twist near the end that I don't want to spoil. I thought it was kind of cool, but by that point you have like not even 2 hours left in the game, so it doesn't really make up for the majority of the game being pretty boring. That being said, I still liked the story, but ultimately for an action game like Uncharted, that doesn't matter nearly as much as the gameplay. Get it? The gameplay? Because we're moving on to the game. Transitions are hard, okay? Uncharted's core gameplay spans all of the games and can essentially boil down into 2 mechanics: climbing and shooting. They're usually separate, but I think Uncharted is at its best when they're happening simultaneously. I'll talk about them separately first. So we got the gunplay, a cover shooter, if you will. Hide, shoot. Pretty fun, pretty simple, very linear. You get 2 weapon slots, so your loadout basically depends on what the enemies in that area are using, which lets the developers tailor certain encounters for certain weapons, which they barely ever do. All right, so I'm gonna explain to you how every single enemy encounter on Uncharted Drake's Fortune works. It's basically the exact same every time. And after I explain this, you will have played the entire game. So, you're gonna run into some ruins with a bunch of conveniently shaped chest-high walls. The ruins are also gonna have like 7 exits where about like 40 pirates are gonna pop out of nowhere. But it's pretty easy, you just massacre all of them. So yeah, speaking of the weapons, there's about 14 different weapons across the game, but I always found myself just using the pistol for everything. There's no weapon sway. I just dink off headshot kills from across the map. And before you ask, I played on a hard mode. I'm a gamer. I've beaten Dark Souls, okay? Naughty Dog did make some effort to mix up the combat with the vehicle sections. Between like the janky boat driving and like the weird, incredibly boring turret sections on the vehicles, it does add some variety to the desperately repetitive gameplay, so I will give them credit. They did try to spice it up a little bit. Endgame, I'm getting pretty sick of the same old hide-and-seek shooting gameplay, but give me some conveniently placed pipes and ridges and oh boy, am I always down to clown with some climbing. Climbing. Does it look like I'm climbing? Enemy like I'm climbing. I genuinely believe Uncharted would not have gotten a sequel if there was no climbing and it was just shooting. It really makes the game stand on its own as completely unique, and it's a nice break between the gunplay sections, and it lets you really appreciate the cool set pieces which fit perfectly in a game all about exploration and adventure. It's also the most cinematic part of the game.
Mine is the actual cinematics, but obviously that's not, you're just watching people, You're just watching cutscenes. That doesn't count. Just shut up.
Because in certain climbing areas, it'll show like fixed camera angles that shows off the cool angles of the levels you're scaling. Sometimes there's even a puzzle or two you gotta complete to progress. Being in centuries-old ruins, you're bound to run into a contraption or two, but the puzzles are so simple. They just boil down to rotate the objects in the correct orientation. And look, I'm not asking to solve like a Rubik's Cube here, but don't treat me like an idiot. But overall, I liked Uncharted Drake's Fortune. And even though it has a boring story, forgettable villains, gets repetitive both in gameplay and scenery, and the graphics have not aged the best.
Hey, but at least for the PS4 version on the Nathan Drake collection, they look pretty good. But we haven't gotten to my favorite part of the game.
It's only 8 hours, which means you can get to Uncharted 2 pretty fast.